Here's what we learn how to make in this video. Hello there, my inspirations. My name is Inspirasper, and today I'm gonna teach you how to make a hip-hop beat in Ableton Live. Now, I really don't make music in this genre. Honestly, I tend to lean towards future bass or progressive house. But I was recently sent a sample pack by Cymatics called Posty. This is a hip-hop sample pack that provides several sound effects, such as drum loops, one-shots, as well as some presets, for example in Serum. So if you want to download the sample pack for yourself, I will leave a link in the description below, and you can follow along with me as I make this video, as I dissect each layer of this beat. I was so inspired by the sample pack, I actually turned this beat into a full-length track. Basically what I'm saying is this sample pack inspired me so much that as a complete beginner, as someone with no experience in the genre, I was able to make a pretty decent hip-hop beat, and then I even expanded upon that and turned that into a full song. So huge shout out to Cymatics. Thank you for hooking me up with this opportunity. But that's enough of me rambling. Let's get into this actual beat. First and foremost, we need to set our BPM. I chose 82. Next, I went on to making what I consider to be the most crucial part of a hip hop beat. This is the sub bass, the 808. Here I made a MIDI clip and then I assigned Serum as my instrument. Specifically, I chose the 808 Trapstar Serum preset provided in the sample pack. Now, I'm working in G minor, and this is what I came up with as my sub bass loop. Fairly straightforward. You'll notice that actually it's just two notes, this G1 and D2, and then repeated, but then at the end I cut the D short by half and I instead play a C. So pretty simple, and honestly that's fine. I think it does the job, but I think it's a little bland. So I went ahead and I added these four notes. Kind of gives it a little bit more rhythm. Next, I added in two more notes and then just copy pasted it elsewhere, this A sharp and this F. It's good to note the 808 Trapstar Serum preset is in mono, which means only one note can play at a time. So I went ahead and I added these two notes right here, this A sharp and this F. And you'll notice that they play at the same time as this sustained note. So as this G is playing, then I jump up to this A sharp. And then I made it really short so it then will go back down. Essentially the sound will glide from this G all the way up to this A sharp and then back down. That's pretty good. I would say the sound design and the notes, how they're laid out, are pretty good. So let's go ahead and add in some audio effects. First, I added in a utility. All this does is it makes the sound mono rather than stereo. I added a little bit of Camel Crusher, which if you don't know is a free third-party plugin. On the 808, it really doesn't provide too much value, but I use it on other layers in this track and it really helps provide some punchiness. I also added in some sausage fattener, which again, more or less the same thing, and an EQ8. This one's fairly important. Here I made a low pass filter at roughly 1000 hertz. Essentially we're just cutting off those high ends, we really don't need them in our sub bass. Also I added in this plugin called Kickstart, where during this flowy part, when it goes from the G to the A sharp, I automated the Kickstart audio effect so the sound kind of dips ever so slightly. It gives it a little extra flavor. So right now at our current state, this is what our bass sounds like. Next, let's talk about percussion. I drew in another MIDI clip right here that has a drum rack of samples assigned to it. The sample I would like to focus on is called Posty Iverson Kick in G. Short, punchy, I like it, so let's draw in a kick pattern. This is what I came up with as my kick pattern. All I did was draw in instances of that sample you just heard in the following pattern. And so that, paired with the current state of my 808, sounds like this. So we're starting to get somewhere, and I'm feeling it. For my kicks, I added in two audio effects, just a kick EQ. This is by default under Ableton's audio effects, EQ8, drums, and then one of these kick EQs. And then I also added in a glue compressor and lowered this threshold just by a little bit, by 2 decibels or so. Essentially, these two audio effects combined make the kick a little bit more powerful. Next, let's go back to our 808 and change 2 things. One, let's add in a sidechain to the kicks that we just made. If you don't know what sidechaining is, that's perfectly fine. I've made tutorials discussing it in the past, but essentially the short and sweet of it is anytime a sound occurs, this layer will duck in volume ever so slightly. So I did that by adding this compressor right here, and I assigned it to my kicks layer. Next, I actually wanted to go back into my 808s, and I decided I didn't like this sustained note. It didn't quite feel right. So what I ended up doing was I went back. I'm gonna keep the same layouts of my notes, but essentially I'm just gonna have it so that the 808 starts up again every time there's a kick. You'll notice it's the same note layouts, but I just had it so that they hit every time there's a kick. The sidechaining plus adjusting those notes really makes the kick stand out a little bit better. Next, let's move on to our snares. I did the same thing as my kicks, where I just drew in a MIDI clip on a layer where I have a drum rack full of snare samples. Specifically, the snare sample that I used that I really liked is called Posty Psychotic Snare 2, D sharp. And then I drew in the snares in the following pattern. It kind of helps if you play that alongside your kicks, so then you can kind of get a feel for the flow of the song. I also then went to adding in some audio effects on our snares. Specifically, I added in sausage fattener. If you don't have it, not that important, not super critical. I did also add in a snare EQ1. I also added in a little bit of reverb, just set the dry wet to 17%, something very low, and a short decay time. And then finally, I also added in another glue compressor. This time, I put the threshold down by about 7 decibels. Altogether, this is what my snares and kicks sound like. Be sure to go back to your 808 and also add in another sidechain to your layer of snares. And of course, be sure to adjust each of these sidechaining to your liking. They don't have to be duplicated. Tailor them to the specific track that they're sidechaining to. All together. Now let's add in a layer of hi-hats. Again, same thing, MIDI clip, MIDI track, drum rack. Specifically, I chose the sample Posty Congratulate hi-hat. I drew in my hi-hats in this following pattern. I would suggest for you to make them rather fast. They're meant to be short and played after each other very quickly. So this is what I created. And be sure to adjust the volume of your hi-hats. You don't want them to be too powerful. In this case, I adjusted my volume to be about -4 decibels. For audio effects, all I did was add in a hat EQ1, same thing, and then also a glue compressor as well, about -20 decibels. Now it's all coming together, let's see what we have. Sounding pretty good so far. Let's move on to the next element. This is the pads. To make my pads, I added in a MIDI clip and assigned the MIDI track a Serum preset called Pad Trap Star. And then I went to working on the actual chord progression itself. I built this around my 808s, and this is what I came up with. Any chord progression will do. This is, again, where you can let your creativity run wild. So I went ahead and I added in an EQ8. I chopped off some of the low ends at around 400 hertz, and then a little bit of the high ends at around 14,000. Just kind of gives your sub bass a little room to breathe down here, and then this white noise up here will be filled in later, so we don't need that. Now, to make the sound a little bit more interesting and a bit more vibrant, let's add in an OTT. OTT is also a free plugin, I believe, that you can get. If you don't have it, you can go under multiband dynamics, and Ableton by default also has an OTT preset. And honestly, they're very similar to each other. They're almost identical. So consider using that if you don't have this exact plugin. But what this adds to the track is the following. So now that I have this pad in the mix, let's hear what that sounds like with our 808 and our percussion. So now our track's starting to have a little bit of life. It has some feeling to it. Finally, let's top it off with some leads. My leads are actually 2 different layers, which together sound like this. And these aren't anything too crazy. In fact, they're just an arpeggiator of my pads. I just took the notes from my chords, pasted them over here, and spaced them out an 1/8 note apart. As for the sound design, one lead sounds like this. This is a preset called Pluck Candy. It has an EQ8 on it just to get rid of the low ends so that 808 can shine a little bit better. And then it also has an OTT, which again pairs really well with this sound. Here is what it's like without that. And then with it. My second layer of leads is very similar. This is the preset Pluck Psychotic. This again also contains an OTT and an EQ8, but this time it also has a sausage fattener and some glue compressor. Without any of these audio effects, the sound itself it's actually pretty similar, but again, the audio effects really help elevate the sound. As you can see, I grouped together my leads and pads, and overall on the entire group itself, I added a little bit of an EQ and then some side chaining to the kicks and the snares. I also added some glue compressors, and this auto filter fades out at the end, but there are quite a few audio effects here, so let's hear what it sounds like without any of these and then with them to see what it contributes to the track. Really helps glue everything together, makes them mesh. The final minor element that we still have to add is a layer of effects, nothing too crazy. This is just some white noise. So this is what I've added in. Now all I've added here is 2 layers of effects, one of them a big white noise crash, and then one of them is a reversed cymbal. Now these are actually the only 2 elements of this beat that are not from the Cymatics Posty Hip Hop sample pack. These are from a different sample pack called Ableton. Just thought I'd let you know. The point is, you can add in any sort of crash, some kind of impact here, as some white noise, and then EQ it so that it only really takes up the high ends, some high frequencies. And then I also sidechained these to the kicks and snares. So then finally, all things considered, everything combined, here is what we have. This is our hip hop beat. There you have it, and like I said, I'm a beginner. I'm not used to making hip hop. This is my first time trying to make this genre, and honestly, I love it. It was a lot of fun to make. So thank you to Cymatics for hooking me up with this Posty hip hop sample pack. If you guys are interested in checking it out, there's a link in the description below. Feel free to go grab it, follow along with this video. Send me songs that you make with this sample pack. Honestly, I'm intrigued to see what you all can make, because I turned this into a full-length song myself. Again, dropping in 1 week. Feel free to check that out. Hope you learned a lot from this video. Feel free to subscribe for future tutorials like this. Have a good one.